Well, I've got a lot to talk to you about this morning, and maybe they got me up early. Boy, I might have an extra 5 or 10 minutes today. Aren't you excited about that? Huh? Amen. Good deal. Why, such a good-looking crowd this morning. Boy, this section over here is just really, almost in the nursery back through there. That's a good, every section is just about right. We don't have any empty chairs, do we? I mean, empty rows. No, all the rows have people in them. Yeah, we went through a few weeks where Edna was making it rough on us for some reason. I don't know what she was doing, but people were not sitting near her. I don't know. Maybe she designed it that way on purpose. Well, you see the title, and I'm going to talk about that here after a while because I think it's so important for us just to understand some of the truths. I have this little story I want to share with you. There were 3 boys on the schoolyard bragging about their fathers, and the first boy said, "Hey, my daddy scribbled a few words on a piece of paper, and he calls it a poem." He said, they gave him $50. Second boy said, "Hey, that's nothing." He said, "My dad scribbles a few words on a piece of paper, and he calls it a song, and they give him $100. Third boy said, "That's nothing." He said, "I can pass you both. I can beat you both." He said, "My dad scribbles a few words on a piece of paper. He calls it a sermon, and it takes 8 people to collect the money that they receive from him." Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Anyway, a lot of stuff's going on out there. Have we all said things before, or we heard things, and we heard it differently than it was really spoken? How many times have we said, "I didn't say that, I said this"? And how many times has somebody said to you, "You told me this"? And you say, "I did not. That's not what I meant. That's not what I said." Well, that's what I heard. It happens all the time. It might have happened before you got to church this morning. And that could be why you're not in a very good mood, sitting there beside your spouse. I don't know. But there's all these times in our life that communication just does not get communicated properly, and it just can be a bad thing. Well, it really is bad when we are told that God said something and he really didn't say it. You know, I mean, God can defend himself, but also we that are here in flesh and bones and blood, we can also hear read what he actually says, and maybe we can defend him as to what people say he did say that he didn't say. Well, in the midst of all of that, I know this. On the serious note, you could be going through something very, very difficult right now, okay? And this point of the sermon this morning, this phrase that has been misquoted can maybe be a disappointment to you because you might need to hear the positive side of it, and we're going to get to the positive side of it as we walk through it. But I'm thinking this morning of those that maybe are going through a tough time, and maybe it's just more than even you're letting on. Maybe it's just beyond belief, except the fact that you're faking a little bit. But somebody kind of catches maybe some body language, or maybe they catch something or hear something regarding what you're going through, and they can say this, and they mean well. A well-meaning Christian can give you this kind of advice. They can say, "Well, let me just tell you something. Let me just tell you something. That God will not give you anything greater than you can bear." And the fact of it is, God didn't say that. Maybe you've heard someone say this, "Well, you know, when God closes a door, he'll open a window." And you're on the 12th story of a building somewhere. And you're thinking, what does that mean? So you hear all these things by well-intended people. And maybe we have been some of those people that have said those well-intended things. But when we say that God won't give you more than you can bear or more than you can handle, that is not the true statement. But I'm going to help you with that statement, all right? If you just go in your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13, there's a scripture there that Paul is giving the church at Corinth regarding a different subject, okay? The subject is about temptation. And so Paul is giving the church at Corinth this statement. He said, God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way of escape. So that's the context of that phrase. God won't give you anything greater than you can handle or anything greater that you can bear, when really the context is 1 Corinthians here, when Paul's talking to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13. So as we think about the statement, God will give you nothing greater than what you can bear, maybe that's the way we want it to read. And maybe that within itself gives us a source of encouragement, but it's still a false statement. Let me just give you some examples. If we go back in the Bible, even in the Old Testament, we can see that there was Gideon back in the book of Judges. He says, I am too weak. I can't handle this. I am not able. I am not capable. I am inadequate. We go to Moses, who was overwhelmed because he knew that he wasn't able to speak the way that he should. And he said, give Aaron. You let Aaron do it. He's eloquent. Aaron can do it. I can't do it. He had a speech problem. Then you have the story of Esther. She was afraid. And then David says, in Psalm chapter 38, David says, my guilt is overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. I am exhausted and completely crushed. My groans come from an anguished heart. I think David understood that he was experiencing something that he could not bear. Okay? And then if we go to the words of Jesus, as we read in Mark's Gospel, chapter 14, Jesus said this, he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. And he said, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. So I believe from those few illustrations, and then we have illustrations obviously from each one of us this morning, there are always going to be times in our life, when things are going to be greater than what we can bear. Someone said this, either you're in the midst of something that is difficult, maybe you have just come through something that is difficult, or you might be just in the beginning stages of something that will be difficult in your life. Okay? Now, those aren't encouraging words. I mean, that's not anything to say, wow, I'm glad I came to church today to hear all of that. I'm really encouraged now. But it's a fact. And you've heard me say it before. You know, we're going to experience trouble. We're going to experience persecution. We're going to experience problems. We're going to experience things that we cannot handle. We're going to experience times when it looks like it is just too much to bear. So we have these illustrations from the Old Testament, even from the illustrations of Jesus, regarding the fact of things being greater than what we can bear. So the question would be this. Why would God allow me to have more than I can handle? Okay? I think we have to conclude that God will give us things in our lives that we cannot handle. Okay? He will give us. Matter of fact, you just think about it. If he never gave us anything except for what we could handle, and I don't mean any disrespect about this at all, But let me just say this. If he never gave us anything greater than what we could handle, why would we need him? So in this world that we live in, where everybody is trying to fix themselves or get it fixed through a pill or through therapy or whatever, and I'm not against any of those things. I'm saying those things are necessary in many situations. We all understand that. And I am not too naive to understand that. But we live in a fallen world, a sinful, fallen world. And there will be things in your life, there will be things in my life that will be greater than what we can bear. Why would God allow that to happen? Why would he allow it to happen? Why would it be one of the situations that we would be involved in where there was absolutely something that takes place and we are completely 100% beside ourselves? We don't understand. We can't comprehend it. We're not mentally, physically, spiritually able to undertake it. Why would that happen? Why would God allow us to have more than we could bear? And there's probably a dozen reasons. But we want to be out here before 2 o'clock. I want to give you 2 reasons, 2 real strong reasons why I believe with all of my heart, even from experience, that God would allow things to come into our life that are greater than what we can bear. Okay? Number 1. I think it would help us. I think one of the reasons is because it will help us to depend on his presence. I think one reason why we can be overwhelmed and have things that are more than what we can bear is so we can at some point in our life understand and experience and have the reality of knowing the absolute, important, awesome presence of our God. I believe this. I believe that too many Christians, too many professing Christians, and too many believers, and too many people that are carrying the name of Christ, I believe there are too many days in our lives that we are not experiencing God's presence. And I talked about that several weeks ago, and I'm back on it here just a little bit this morning. But there's something, my friend, that is so awesome about the presence of God, and there's absolutely nothing in the world to take the place of God's presence. Nothing. I love you all, and I love being with you all, and I love people, and I love the church, and I love fellowship, and I love eating together. We're going to have a men's night out Saturday. I love all of those things. But you know what? There's nothing in the world to compare when we understand and feel and sense and know the presence of God in our life. Are you experiencing his presence? Did you experience God's presence last week? Was there anything that went on in your life last week at all where you just said, oh my goodness, oh my, this is nothing except being in the presence of God? And I'm not trying to get dramatic here, and I'm not trying to be somebody that is emotional, because the presence of God can come in many, many different forms, okay? He can come as just a gentle whisper. It can come with maybe an overwhelming sense of his presence to the point where maybe we get emotional, okay? Or where it's just a sense of awe, unbelief, or disbelief. We can't believe what just happened because of God's presence. There's something about the presence of God that is absolutely amazing. You know what? When things go good, we tend to forget about God. Okay? I mean, even the very best person, even the very, very best Christian. Now, I'm not saying we forget about God, but when things really, really go well, and things are going really, really good, and everything's working great, and everything's going like clockwork, and we got the raise, and we got a day off, and extra vacation days, and whatever. When things are going good, it's just, now we know he's there, But because things are going good, we're enjoying all the things of life, and we know God's there. But when things are going good, we could almost forget the presence of God. And I think, the Israelites, they were close to God when they depend on Him for the daily milk and honey and all that. But what happens when things get rocky? What happens? What happens when the very first words out of a person's mouth, when things get bad or they get bad news, is, "Oh my God!" We've heard it time and time again. Just woke 4 people up. They were sound asleep. They weren't snoring, but they were sound asleep. When things are going good, we know God's there, but we're just enjoying the good things. But when things are going bad, when things are bad and you get worse, and we don't know how we're going to survive, we have a tendency to say, "Well, where's God? And I need God. And why don't I have God? And where's God during this time? Where's the pastor? Where's the church? Where's my brothers and sisters?" What is it? Could it be that God would give you more than you can bear simply because He wants you and I to experience His presence? Truth. I believe it with all of my heart. All the noise, all the activity, all the things that we're involved in throughout a given week, and it's so noisy and loud, and our minds are so cluttered, and we're just going so fast, so quick. And God's been there, but we haven't heard Him because of what we're going through. Jonah. Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh. He rebelled. Jonah chapter 2, he says this, "In my distress, in my distress, I called on the Lord, and He answered me. When my life was ebbed away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you." But it was the bad before the good. It was experiencing even the rebellious part before realizing and understanding and appreciating the presence of God through a prayer. When life is hard, that's never the time to forget God. Never. And I have a quote I'm going to give you, and I want you to write it down. Never let the presence of a storm, okay, I'm going to say it again. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. I heard that this last week. That's not original with me, but I'm going to quote it again. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Call on Him. David said this, "The Lord is near to all who call on Him." Isn't that encouraging? The Lord is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth. When we know and believe that He is the way, the truth, and the life. Wow. I don't know about you, but there are times when I don't appreciate God's presence the way I should. until I'm going through a storm. I wish it weren't that way. I can appreciate his presence other times too, but there's something about the storms that we go through that really just help us. It's scriptural. It's so scriptural. It just helps us to draw close to his presence. There's one more. But never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Please, don't ever. God doesn't deserve that. That's not the kind of God that we serve. He wants to be there with you in the storm. Yeah, and the storm will be greater than what you can bear from time to time? Absolutely. Why? One reason, so you can appreciate and enjoy and experience and depend on the presence of God. Number two, I think the second reason God allows us to have more than what we can bear is so we can experience not only his presence, but his power. His power. We live in a power-raging world. We do. I like power. Not personal power. I like power of a vehicle. Don't you? Or the power of a lawnmower that can cut the high grass and not even flinch. The governor doesn't even kick on. It just goes through the high grass because you got you got way more horsepower than what you need. I picked up about 3 months ago a truck that's about 10 years old. Are you surprised? Huh? You want to hear the story, don't you, huh? I want to tell it to you. There have been times I'll just grab something because it's a good deal, and then obviously, sometimes I'm a little cheap. I don't maybe go for the extra stuff. And anyway, but I was able to move some things around with some of my vehicles and trying to just get by with only a couple instead of a couple too many, all right? But I was for the very first time grabbed a hold of a Chevrolet. It's a Duramax diesel with an Allison transmission. Now, guys, if you're mechanical at all, you'll understand that's pretty awesome. Even if you're a Ford guy. Now, I know Dan Oos is not here, but right now he's probably wanting me to just not even talk about this GM. That's all right. But there's something about the power of that vehicle. And they call it the torque. You can hook a trailer behind it. You can hook a camper behind it. You can have it loaded, and it almost says, is there something back there behind it? What's going on? It's pretty amazing. Power is an intriguing thing. Now they have these cars that are out. I think they have this one of these Dodge cars at Hemis or whatever, 600 or 700 horsepower. You know, what are you going to do with all that stuff? The speed limit's, 70, at max 75, right? But anyway, power is a pretty big part of our society. It always has been, but it seems like it just is more than it ever has been before. So I think when I talk about power, I think we can relate to it, okay? God might want you to go through a storm. He might want you to have more than what you can bear so you can experience his power. And there's something about the power of Jesus Christ that is unlike any other power in this world. Now, we have a story of Paul, who had a thorn in the flesh. And three different times, he asked that God would remove that thorn from his flesh. And it never took place. It never happened. I don't understand why. Wouldn't you think of all people, the greatest person ever lived outside of Jesus Christ was the Apostle Paul? And he's praying 3 times for this thorn to be removed, and it is not removed. Some think it was maybe an ice problem or whatever. Nobody knows for sure what it was. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what it was. Called it the thorn in the flesh. It could have been some church member. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, he had a thorn in the flesh, and it was never removed. It was never removed. After 3 times, he talked to God about it. So look what he writes. Look what Paul writes in 2 Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10. He has this thorn in the flesh, something that he has prayed and asked for it to be removed. But here's how he concluded the whole deal. This is huge. If we get nothing else, Lord Jesus, help us to get this. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Just circle that right there. Just circle that. My power is made perfect in weakness. If we have all this power, we can never overshadow the power of God, but the point of it is, if we have all this power, why do we need God's power? But in my weakness, I have this power, and I'm made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses. So because the power of God is made perfect in Paul's weakness, he said, I'm going to boast of my weaknesses. Why? Because that's where I'm experiencing God's power, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses. I delight in insults. I delight in hardships. I delight in persecutions. I delight in difficulties. I mean, this is the Apostle Paul writing this. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Can't we get that at all? But no, we want to fix it. We want it to be fixed. We want it to be so it's not bad, so it's prettier or easier. And we have all these things that fix things for us. Nobody's to have anything that's not fixed in life anymore. And Paul's not experiencing that. It was not fixed for him. One thing that was fixed for Paul, that he was delighting in, and that he was experiencing, and that he is telling us about, was his faith, his trust in the power of God. And that was enough. Believe it or not. He said, that is enough. And when I read that, I am just so convicted how we want everything to be just okay, and we want to be all right, fine and dandy, and no problems and no hardships and everything just great. And folks, I like it better that way too. I really, really do. But when it's not all great, and when it's not all fixed, and when it's not all okay, Paul is saying this. He said, I delight in the power of God. God's power. And I'm just concerned about the church of Jesus Christ. And I could be concerned about you, and I love you. But may God help us to get to a place in our spiritual walk, that if this happens to be what takes place in our life, where there's insults and hardships and persecutions and weaknesses and difficulties, when all this stuff is just bombarding us, will we be able to say, hey, you know what? I delight in the power and in the presence of Almighty God. Why would God allow something to come into your life or into my life greater than what we can bear? I mean, how can God, I dare God. Why would a good, loving, caring God do that? Why would he allow things to come into your life and my life, not just once or twice, but maybe like Paul, maybe it's never fixed. Maybe it's never fixed. I have two reasons. It could be because he wants you to delight in his presence. And it could be because he wants you to delight and depend on his power. This is not me. This is coming from the word of the Lord this morning. I'm just a messenger. I'm just the one trying to encourage myself and trying to encourage you for us to really understand and get a handle on, you know what? Things are not always great. And things will not always get fixed. And instead of running and hiding or blaming God, why not do like David did? Why not do like Gideon did? Why not? Why not just lean hard into the presence of God and say, oh, I want to delight in your presence? And why wouldn't we say, I want to understand. I want to understand and experience the power of God. You're in one of three situations this morning. Either you've just come out of a tough situation and you're having some good days. You could be right in the middle of a bad situation right now. Okay? Or number three, you could be right in the beginning stages of a bad situation going on in your life.